Hello and welcome everybody to Guildmaster Gaming. This time around, I've got a screenplay writer with us, Steele Haney. He placed in the competition at the Film Quest Film Festival this year, so we got a chance to talk. And his play or screenplay is called ReddeR. So, Steele, please introduce yourself and tell us about your movie.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Steele Haney. I go by Steele, and I wrote the screenplay ReddeR, as Dan said. It takes place in 1986, and it's about a troubled woman who kidnaps a 16-year-old pop star while she's on her mall tour, and will do anything to keep her in her basement, in her house, and keep her within her grasp. So as the world starts caving in on her, and as the authorities start to suspect her, everything starts to kind of cave in, and she slowly starts to become more unhinged and do unfathomable things to keep her within her reach.
Okay, so I'm going to admit, when I first started, when I saw the pitch first and read some of it, I was saying, Misery probably comes to mind. Uh, and I'm sure that was a little bit of inspiration, but you take a really different turn to that storyline. So I want to ask, what was
To
your,
which storyline? Sorry, you.
yeah, yeah, it's breaking up a little bit. I hope this records properly. So,
Yeah,
there, I can tell obviously there is some of the movie Misery and the book Misery
yeah.
is part of it. But besides that, what was your inspiration? Because you provide a very different twist
Mm,
from that story to yours. So, what was some of your other
yes.
inspirations to kind of pull this together?
Yeah, so I've always, studied film and characters, and I've really have always been drawn to the antagonist storyline. We always seem to focus on the protagonist throughout the film, and they always have the arc, but I thought it would be cool to follow around the antagonist and kind of making them the protagonist, but they're still, pretty evil and crazy and wild. Um, so I really wanted to take that twist on this one, is to follow her around throughout the majority of the film. Um, so I've always been fascinated. Like my top three horror films are The Shining, Misery, and Pearl, which all three of them have that slow unraveling of the main antagonist, which it has always been just so interesting to me. So I wanted to do that with this film. Everything I've written three full-length screenplays, and I've written one short screenplay, and all of them take place in the 80s. I just really love that decade. I think it has the perfect amount of technology without being distracting. The villains can kind of get away with more because cameras aren't everywhere, phones aren't everywhere, and it was just the beginning of like blood testing, so you could kind of get away with crimes a bit easier back then. Um, I really love that decade. I love the music. I love the mall culture. So I always try to like trickle that in as well. But yes, Misery was like a big inspiration for this one. I loved Kathy Bates. I loved her performance in that film. I love the book, as well as like The Shining, that slow unraveling of, Jack Nicholson, and it's just has always been such a cool thing for me.
Well, you look a little young to be a child of the 80s, experiencing that firsthand, being someone
Oh,
that
appreciate
was
that.
there. So,
Well,
so what was,
I was born in the 80s, so I was born in 85. So
yeah,
I
see that,
experienced it a little bit.
see, that's after I graduated from high school.
You look
So
great.
what,
You look great.
so what was your indoctrination into the 80s culture that drew you to it? That, you mentioned the
Uh,
technology and some of the cutting edge stuff
yeah,
at the time,
yeah.
but how'd you get there?
I've always loved films from the 80s. I loved John Hughes films, and horror films from the 80s, like The Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play. I loved the Halloween movies. And Friday the 13th. I know those started in the 70s, but I just genuinely just love that decade. I love the fashion. I love the just the teenage culture, the coming of age stories that they had. So um I just the films, I just grew up on them, and I've always kind of stuck with it just because of I felt like the storylines were somewhat simple. I feel like sometimes screenwriters tend to overcomplicate storylines nowadays when, and especially in Stephen King's writings, like he takes a very basic concept and just elaborates on it. So he always talks about like family heartache and trauma, like what's the worst thing that can happen to you, and he'll like pick one thing and then he'll say, okay, how do we make that scary and how do we make that horror? I saw some interview where he was talking about that and that really resonated with me. So I also like kind of like the storylines, how like, you kind of keep it simple and grounded, and you can make endless possibilities with that simplicity without confusing people, and people are really invested in that storyline. You can make it as unique as possible. I also love Stranger Things. I know that kind of brought back a revival of the 80s and like pop culture. It's one of my favorite series of all time. So, but yeah, I don't know if that really answered your question, but
Oh,
I've
it
I've
does.
always kind of just had a fascination with.
I was going to find something here, kind of share with you, just because you mentioned it. Yeah, I was gaming back then. That's
Oh,
the original
nice.
player's handbook from the time that Stranger Things is all depicted in.
That's so cool. That's awesome. I love that.
So, so you kind of actually answered kind of where my follow-up question goes, and that is, you wrote ReddeR, and it's obviously a horror story. Maybe not,
Mhm.
it's got a little bit of gore the way it's written, but it's like you were saying, that unraveling of the mental state. Um,
Mhm.
but I think you've already kind of mentioned your draw to horror has been Stephen King and that whole premise that he kind of uses that same format. Is that the case? And
Yeah, I always try to just I want to write something that is a page turner, and I want people to be really invested in the characters themselves. Um, and I feel like when I start writing, I'm very visual, so I find a location that I want this person to live, and I even like go to Zillow and I find the house that they live in. I go and look at images of people from that time period. I'm like, okay, I want them to look like this. I do drive-throughs on YouTube, like videos of people driving through the town, so I understand the town. I understand what it feels like. I understand the economic landscape, the their accents, what people do for a living there. So I really try to build a world that people want to see in my screenwriting, and people. It's like I always like say it's like it's like bringing people back and making it seem like it's not so long ago. Like it's like still within grasp. So but yeah, I'm very visual. So I have like a whole document before I even start writing my outline of like the visuals and what it looks like and what it feels like to be there, what the weather is going to be like, the time of year, um, and so forth. So I really love Halloween time and fall, and everything I've written has been based in Kentucky, which is where I'm originally from. In those small towns in Kentucky where things haven't changed, it doesn't haven't seemed to change much since that time period. With history of like coal mining back in the day, that was once a thriving industry. So I really try to understand that landscape as well as the people who live there when I'm writing. So I want to make sure that the people seem authentic to the time and also the location that I'm writing, because I feel like if you don't have that, it's not believable. So I really start with the characters.
okay, so you start with the characters and build into the location and everything. And I work with a lot of writers and authors, and we always tell them, write what you know. And it seems like you're
Mhm.
delving into your background for that, but you also go out and research the areas to make sure that you got the visuals correct and that you're putting into it.
Yes, for
And I
sure.
saw how you did that because you
Yeah.
also sent me the pitch deck for this screenplay, and it
Mhm.
has a bunch of
Yeah.
pictures that kind of show that. So this
Yeah.
screenplay, it's placed at this festival, and it seems like it's done fairly well that way. How long did it take you to come up and develop this to the point that you felt like it was ready to submit and go after something?
Yeah. So I started writing this probably in spring of 2023. Um, I kind of started as a concept probably in like February of 2023, and I I had been like researching all of these like films about like, that mental unraveling, that slow unraveling, that where the antagonist becomes unhinged. And I was like, I want to write a role for a woman that like people cannot deny the greatness of it. Like I want them to be really challenged and really push themselves in terms of their craft. And I wanted to create this character who's Debbie in the film, um, to be really complex and have like all these layers of not only shame but motherhood, but also like somewhat of a desire for fame, that she once had when she was younger. And I also wanted to leave certain things up for interpretation. Like, for instance, like, did she kill her parents? We don't know, but it's implied. And kind of like leaving it open for maybe like we could do a prequel screenplay, or we could, I kind of also try to set it up for like a sequel, um, a little bit open-ended at the end. So that was kind of my gist. So
No, that's good. So,
yeah,
you've already talked, you might have some prequel information where you can take this character's story in different directions. For
yeah.
this particular screenplay, have you had any nibbles or points that people have shown interest in it?
Uh, Not quite yet. I've been in the festival circuit for since the around like February or March, and it's been pretty well received, which I'm really excited about. It's gone through like countless rewrites, just trying to make it better and better every day. And I know that will never end until it's on the screen. It's a part of the job. But it is somewhat contained. I know there are some like mall scenes and some like a concert at the mall. However, most of the film is contained and could easily be filmed for a somewhat restricted budget. Um, but yeah, I my goal is to like I would love to get a literary agent or a literary manager to like I'm my goal is to kind of get in front of people and start pitching this to like production companies, because I've got the pitch deck ready to go and just getting it out there. So now that it's almost finished with that festival circuit, I think it's ready to go, and I know it's going to continue to be rewritten, but um yeah, that's kind of my next step is I would love to get representation is kind of my next
Okay.
step and sell it. And eventually someday I would love to direct or work alongside directors to learn, rewrite while I'm on set, and then possibly get into the directing because I do have such a visual, like eye for detail, and I love lighting. I love, everything. I studied acting for 2 years. That really helped me with not only screenwriting, but just like studying scenes and beats and tension building, um, and the importance of the script. Because without the script being good or great, then the film has no way of being great. So you have to start with the basics and the writing and the making sure it's something that people want to see.
Okay, so like you've mentioned screenwriting, do you do other forms of writing as well?
Mostly screenwriting. I grew up writing poems, short stories, and songs. I wrote music in college, and then I was in a band. So I've written like some musical scores, just for fun. Everything has like a whole concept theme. So um, if anybody ever wanted to use it for the film, they could. But yeah, I've written, I was in a pop band for like 10 years in Las Vegas, called Boy. It was me and a female singer. We wrote and composed everything ourselves. So yeah, I've always written, but in 2022, I've always wanted to screenwrite, but in 2022 is when I finally was like, I'm gonna start. So then I wrote my first film, Ricker Rocker, which is a family-friendly Halloween horror film, which is still in the festival circuit. And then the second one was full on horror, which was a ReddeR. And then my third is another horror that takes place in 1984 called Greenville Society.
Okay, you got me with an interesting point here. You say that it's a family-friendly horror film.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
What
yeah.
would you define a family-friendly horror film?
Well, it's kind of like well, it takes place in 1984 and it's about a group of kids who come face to face with the Ricker, which is a witch. And on the 99th anniversary of his name was Richard Rochester, but they nicknamed him Ricker because they claim that he was a witch. He's coming back 99 years later, and at the Trick or Treat Fest, the Halloween festival that they have every year, the kids have to come face to face with them, and two of them find out that they're witches as well. So it's kind of like Hocus Pocus, but a little bit more scary. Meets Goonies, meets Stranger Things kind of vibe. So.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, yeah.
That just caught me as an interesting,
Yeah.
family-friendly horror. Wait a minute.
Yeah, yeah, it's called Raker Rocker, and it was really fun to write. It was my first one. I did my own research on how to write screenplays. I bought the programs, Final Draft, and just kind of taught myself everything. I was very descriptive in my first draft because I didn't know, like, I was writing like a director. So I wrote every detail, everything. It was like 140 pages long. And then I started submitting and they were like, you should cut this back. So I got it down to like 114. So and every day, I mean, I'm still continuing to rewrite it. So, but it's a fun one. It's a good one. And I think it's a fairly hefty budget. It's a bigger budget, but I think it would be pretty well loved by families. I think it would be a fun one to watch every year. So
Okay. So kind of talking about in general here, what you said you've always wanted to be a screenplay writer and you've done all these other things. What was the thing early on in your life that you went, that's what I want to do?
yeah. I just from the very first memory that I have, I've wanted to be in the film industry. I remember watching Michael Jackson's Thriller, and I was like, I want to watch. Like that's my first memory is watching that music video in the '80s and thinking I want to do that. Like I didn't know what to what capacity. Like, and then eventually I was like, I want to do acting, and which I still am interested in doing. I still like audition for roles for film. And have been training for that. But it was real. My sister passed away unexpectedly in 2020, and then that made me kind of realize, okay, like I need to go for it. Like life is short. So I was like, all right, I'm going to write my screenplay. So my first one, I wrote the first draft in like 2 weeks. Um, and I just like buckled down and did it. And then, of course, tons of rewrites, but the first draft was down in 2 weeks. So yeah, I've kind of always just known like I wanted to do something with film. It fascinated me. Especially horror. You can do so many things with horror, from camera angles to music to the range of acting. If you want it to be super, realistic, or if you want it to be overly dramatic. Um, all of it's just beautiful. I don't know, like if you watch The Shining or Pearl, you could screen grab any section of that film and frame it. It's just beautifully filmed, and the camera angles are just magnificent. And I've always been fascinated by that as well as like really that roles that really stand out and really push the envelope. And that's why I wanted to write ReddeR, is I really wanted to push that envelope for that female actress and really take it to a new level. Um, that has not quite been done um, recently, at least. Um, so yeah, that was kind of my intention, but I've always kind of known
So you've known that
my
you
first
wanted to do
memory.
that, and you also actually just told us why horror too. Uh, that was
Yeah.
the big draw there. So and that's usually something I talk with people about because that was my start was in horror writing, and I work with
Okay.
a number of horror people. Um,
Right.
so why do you think horror is such a draw? Besides, you're talking the visuals, but for people to
Yeah.
watch it, do you think that's the big draw is the visual aspects, or do you think there's more to it?
Yeah, I think horror has endless possibilities. Like I said earlier, like Stephen King, like he wrote from a place of hurt originally. Like it's like what is the most heartbreaking thing a person can go through and how do you make that scary? Like it's you can literally take any emotion and turn it into a horror. Anything can be a horror. Like just me being on this Zoom call with you when the doors closed, like it could end up being a horror film. Like so, then there's like so many ways you can experiment, like Alfred Hitchcock camera angles that he experimented with, and like Psycho and Rear Window and um, The Birds and going to like the scores. There are just so many. You could go for like more orchestral. You could do synth. You could do rock. You could do something really soft and light and lullaby-ish, and it's still creepy. And it's just fascinating what you can really truly do with horror. And I think it you can really push the envelope. You can really change it up and really experiment, which keeps people intrigued and interested. I don't know if I know this is really controversial, but like Skinamarink that just recently came out, I was on online and half the screenwriters like, this is brilliant. Half the screenwriters were like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. But I was really interested in it because it was so experimental. Um, it was filmed for such a low cost and it did make me feel the way the director intended, which is, I think, a beautiful thing. It was so experimental with minimal, like very minimal dialogue, and it made you feel like you were kind of trapped in a house, which is what they kind of wanted. So, yeah, there's just so much you can do with it. I don't know. So that's why I'm kind of drawn to it. You can really push the boundaries, and I think anything goes in horror, which is cool. And the community that I've met through the festivals, they're all so supportive. They're wild, they're weird, and it's awesome. It's like a really cool community to be um, surrounded by and supported by.
I agree with you about the wild and weird and odd. And I
Yeah,
keep trying to get more of my writer friends to come to the festivals with me just for that reason, because it's,
yeah,
and they're like, it's like, okay.
yeah.
It
Yeah,
is quite an ex if you've never been to a festival, they are quite the experience.
yes, yes, they really are. I've been to several, quite a few this year, and I didn't realize when I started writing that half the job is networking in order to make it. So I've been trying to be, I'm not the best at networking, so I'm trying to do better. But I've noticed just the community is really supportive and so great, and we're all just in it together. Like we want to support each other, we want to connect one another if we have the connections, and which I really truly appreciate. So it's really cool.
So now that you've finished up and it sounds like you're getting near the end of ReddeR's run on the festival circuit. What's up next for Still?
Well, I finished my first draft of Greenville Society. It's my next feature. Well, first I want to pitch ReddeR and get it out there and get it sold, and same as with Ricker Rocker, get representation. But in terms of creatively, I finished my first draft of Greenville Society, which in 1984, a worrisome town struggles to solve a series of religiously motivated murders that all have one thing in common, and that it's that all the victims are gay men. And it takes place in a small town in Kentucky as well. So I finished my first draft. I got some notes on it. So now I'm jumping into my rewrite. I also started submitting my short film. It's called Tales of the Macabre, to some festivals, and I'm hoping to film that with some local filmmakers. And that I found here. I'm based in Las Vegas right now, so I'm hoping to film it with some of those the local crew that I met at the Las Vegas Film Festival. And I've sent it over to them. They seem pretty excited. It's pretty isolated. It's just an 8 or 9 page short film. So those are kind of my next projects, and I possibly might be acting in that one too. So I'm always writing. I've also started a fourth feature, so I'm just continuously creating and trying to find inspiration, and also just watching old horror films and studying those as well. So
Okay, so you've mentioned this work that you're doing. What do you like to, being down in the Vegas area, I know you got a lot of outdoor activity. I'm not sure if that's there, but what do you like to do to relax and kind of break away and kind of recharge?
um, I I mean, usually it's writing to like break away. But once I've like finished like a really intense draft and I just need a break, I like to watch movies with my husband, um, or travel. We'll like go visit I have family in Kentucky still, so we'll go visit them, or we'll go on like family vacations, and we're going to Disneyland in a couple weeks. So I just try to just relax and chill. I have two dogs and just take it day by day. I'm really into like politics and studying politics, so I read up on that. And um, but yeah, I'm always just trying to find inspiration. Mostly, it's watching horror films or ones that I've seen before and just rewatching them to study them even more. And occasionally, we'll work on music scores just for fun. But yeah, that's kind of like what I would like to do. I usually like to keep that creative um, flow going in my brain because I just love it. It makes me feel fulfilled.
Okay. So now I want to ask
Yeah.
if people wanted to follow your work or kind of see how things go for you, where can they find you online?
Yeah, on Instagram, you can follow me. It's at Steele James, Steele James. And that's usually where I post mostly. I'm also on LinkedIn, under Steele Haney, or I've like Coverfly, Film Freeway, all that stuff. But I'm mostly active on Instagram. That's usually where I post most of my stuff, and you can contact me through there as well. So
Okay. So now you've been writing, you got a couple of screenplays out, you've had a little bit of success with the festivals with your screenplay. If someone was to come to you and say, "Hey, I want to become I want to write screenplays,"
yeah.
what advice would you give them?
My first advice would be to write the movie that you want to see. Um, Write the movie that you would love to see that hasn't been done before. Um, that would be my first thing of advice. And my second piece of advice would be if you plan on filming it yourself and raising the funds yourself, keep in mind locations and characters and budget while you're writing. Um, so that would be my second piece of advice if they plan on filming it themselves. But first is always write the movie that you want to see and write a movie that you love. Don't try to please anyone. Just try to please yourself. And if you're pleasing yourself, you're going to please more people because you believe in your art. You're not doing it for others.
I always tell people every form of art has its own audience. So I
Exactly.
agree with you kind of what you're saying there is it's really go out and create what you like and you'll find other people that like it too.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, so here's the final thing I'm going to throw out to you. Um, any last words you'd like to tell anybody or thanks? I mean, this is your chance to like maybe practice your Oscar acceptance speech and
Oh my goodness. No, I'm terrible at this. No, I love screenwriting and I would love to get representation. If anybody knows anyone that's willing, to meet with me or anything like that, that would be wonderful. I just really want to, write films and or TV shows, in the horror genre. That's kind of my long-term goal. So, or short term, I guess I should say. Yeah, I just love writing and, for those of you who are thinking about screenwriting or considering it, or just like you feel like you're uninspired, just try to just find inspiration where you can. Take notes, keep a notebook with you, write down ideas. Just start an outline, just write a couple words a day. Don't be hard on yourself. Because I know the life of a screenwriter is kind of like up and down, up and down, up and down because you get feedback. Sometimes you get successes. Sometimes it's like you have to rework your art. So it's very up and down, but in the end, do something that you love, do something that you believe in, and just keep going. You just got to keep writing. So
well, you did remind me of one other thing and maybe I'm going to ask now because you were
yeah,
saying about some of the things you'd like. What would be your dream job to land
my
in the
dream.
film industry?
I would love to write a film and direct it myself. Um, that would be my dream goal in Hollywood or wherever. I just want to do it myself to prove that, I have what it takes, and I just love that work, and making it come to life, like from paper to the screen, is my dream. So yeah, I've always respected the director Ty West, and his trilogy with his X trilogy is just amazing. Pearl, X, and Maxine. So that sort of stuff, I really geek out on, especially when movies tie together in unexpected ways. That's really cool. So yeah, someday. It's
All
got to keep
right.
going.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me and everybody here. It's been a pleasure talking with you and seeing what, yeah, I don't remember, I'll admit, I don't remember if we talked at Film Quest or not. That was a pretty wild
Yeah.
week.
It was wild. Yeah. We didn't chat, but I saw you from across the room at the brunch. So, and that's when I emailed you again just to follow up. So, yeah.
Okay. So I want to thank
Yeah.
everybody for joining us as we've talked with Steele Haney and his screenplay ReddeR. And if you like what we're doing here, please like it, share it. If you want to subscribe, that gives us opportunities doing more things like this. And still, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate your time and giving me the opportunity to do this.
All right. Until next
Bye,
time.
everyone.